And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
Business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Gocher.
how well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at preneurmedia.tv.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's PreneurCast. Dom here, and we've had a few comments from people wondering where I've got to the last few weeks. We've had some excellent interviews and conversations with Pete, but I've not really been present in the podcast. I just thought I'd give you an update on that. Two reasons really. One, Pete has had some fantastic opportunities to have some great conversations with some pretty well-known people. We've already published a few of them, and we're going to be publishing a few more in the next few weeks. And it's just an opportunity you can't turn down when these kind of people turn up at your door and want to have a chat with you. So that was great news for Pete. But also Pete and I have both been busy hard at work on our Profit Hacks product. And we are entering into the final launch phase now, something that you folks are going to be finding more out about. We're going to be doing a couple of special edition podcasts in the next few weeks just to let you know what's going on with that and how it's gone along. So watch out for those. This week we are going to publish something that was recorded a little while ago, a conversation between Pete and Ryan Holiday. Ryan recently wrote a book, or published a book, called Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator. Now Ryan, you may or may not have heard of, but he's worked behind the scenes with some very well-known and best-selling authors, including Tucker Max, Robert Greene, and Tim Ferriss. And also, most famously, he's been the marketing director of American Apparel from a very relatively young age. So Pete, in this conversation, talks to Ryan all about his past, his work with these people, and his interesting approach to marketing and promotion, which is the subject of his book, Trust Me, I'm Lying.
So most people probably not familiar with the name Ryan Holiday, but I'm guessing most people would be very much aware of your work. You know, you've worked with behind the scenes with people like Tim Ferriss, Tucker Max, Robert Greene, but probably most famously been the marketing director of American Apparel since, was it 24, 23? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I deliberately sort of want the work of my clients to overshadow my own. Like, if you know the name of the publicist, that publicist is not sort of serving their clients' interests as much as they're serving their own. So for me, it was about doing the things that I do for people and keeping my name out of it, because if you're talking about what you're doing, it makes it a lot harder to actually do those things.
Yep.
So this book has sort of been, it's not the farewell for me, but it's about changing the game up a little bit. So I'm sort of coming out and talking about myself and the things that I've done for the first time.
Very cool. So it's pretty clear you're not afraid to work with edgy brands, for want of a better term. So is there any cool stories from the experiences, and I'll use the word exploits?
Yeah, I mean, like, from my perspective, working with controversial clients is preferable to safe clients. Like, I'd rather them be pushing me and my ideas and telling me, like, Ryan, that's too safe, than the alternative, which is them, you putting a lot of time and energy into coming up with something creative and cool, and then saying, like, oh, you know what, that scares me, I don't want to do it. I want to work with clients who scare me as much as I scare them.
Yeah.
And I mean, this year alone has been sort of a rundown of that. I did a stunt with Tucker where we paid a bunch of celebrities to tweet super offensive things, like, about themselves. We used this platform that's called Sponsored Tweets. That was a huge thing. It did millions of page views. And then most recently, in promotion for one of his books, we tried to name a Planned Parenthood clinic after him because there was a joke in one of his books. And obviously this is, like, going to make some people balk and shut down a little bit. But the joke was, like, that he paid for so many abortions for girls he'd hooked up with that they should name a Planned Parenthood clinic after him.
Yeah.
So we sat down and said, like, what if we actually tried to do that? What would happen? And that's sort of where a lot of the things that I do come from. Like, someone throws out a crazy idea, and then we say, what would happen if we actually did that? And then we go out and do it.
Yeah. So with those two examples, from my understanding, looking at it from afar, the majority of page views and the majority of those two campaigns, for want of a better term, really came after the actual event themselves through the PR. Did you actually anticipate either of those two things to actually come off? Did you actually expect Kim Kardashian to approve those tweets, or did you actually think that Planned Parenthood would actually accept the money, or were you actually hoping they would reject it to make a media story out of it?
Either way, it's upside for me. But the strategist Saul Alinsky, he used to say it's not the action, it's the reaction that the activist goes for. And so for us, we're not just, we're doing this thing, and if it happens, that's great. But what we're also really thinking about and anticipating is, how are people going to react, and is that reaction something that will be good for us? And in those cases, we knew that chances are the overreaction to the stunt would be a lot more entertaining and get a lot more attention than just the stunt coming off, even if it happened perfectly.
Yeah, brilliant. I absolutely love that. So speaking of the book, late last year, I think it was Gawker and Gallicat both reported that you got a $500,000 advance for your very first book. Trust me, online. Right. People didn't miss that in the introduction, which was, I think, quickly shot down by the New York Reporter, saying that that was all part of the pre-publicity. Do you have a take on that? What's your response? Were you practicing what you're preaching in the book with that particular report?
I mean, I always practice what I preach. That's what I do. But the funny thing about the book advance is that the fact is I got paid a lot of money for my first book. And the reason I can't tell you how much I got paid is that authors are not allowed to comment on the size of their advance, ever.
Yeah.
And so the people who were reporting that it was this number and the people who were reporting that it was not that number are both wrong, because neither of them know what the number is. Only I know, and only the publisher knows.
Yep.
And neither of us ever told anyone what that number was. So that number has always been confidential. All I can say is that it was well into the six figures, and it was a lot of money.
Yeah. So was it you involved?
And that's how it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's how it works. Is that people on the internet sort of they create their own spectacle, which they then get page views out of supposedly disputing, and so neither Gallicat nor the New York Observer actually bothered to talk to me for their stories. And so, if anything, what I was trying to prove with the advance was that nobody does any work. And people talk about anything, and that's sort of exactly what happened.
Yeah, so true. So how are you describing the book? Because it's all about media manipulation. So what's your description and way you're communicating the book to the public?
Yeah, so media manipulation is basically the act of making people do or think things through the media that they otherwise might not think or do. And I guess if you had to sort of explain what I do, I'd say that we live in what's called an attention economy, where the most precious resource is people's time and attention, and my job is to fight for and get attention from my clients through whatever the most effective and efficient means are. And it just so happens that controlling and influencing and manipulating blogs for the last 3 or 4 years has been the best way to do that, and that's what I've done.
Yeah. Do you see that changing?
The book is. I don't see it changing. The book is about sort of how to do that, and also what the consequences of doing that are. And I lay it out in very explicit detail how someone can sort of manipulate or control the media for their own brand or business. And then I sort of on the content provider side, I say look, this stuff is happening. This is corrupting the material you're doing. Is this how you want it to be? And I don't see it changing I mean, I'd like it to change, and part of writing the book was hoping that it would. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of the root forces that I talk about in the book are very deep and intrinsic, and they need to be addressed before, you know, matters of opinion can really shift anything.
Yeah. So as you said there, you know, you hope it's going to change, but you know, we won't give away too much of what's in the book because it's full of some pretty cool case studies. But in the introduction, you actually talk about how this media manipulation kind of encompassed you, and I think you quoted at the start saying, from a novel, indulging myself in the illusions that we can deal with filth without becoming the thing we touch. I love that quote, and I love that novel, but did you find this a bit of a church confessional for you, putting the book together? Is that part of what it was meant to do?
Yeah, I mean, Confessions is in the subtitle for a reason. I really wanted to expose this to people because I think it's important and I think it matters. And I've found it hard to think or talk about anything else sort of after I realized that this existed. And so part of it came out of my obsession. I don't feel guilty about anything. That's not where I'm coming from in the book. This isn't like, I did all these bad things, please forgive me. It's more like, look, I saw behind the curtain and I know what goes on there, and I survived and thrived in that world better than anyone, and now I'm back on the other side and I want to tell you guys what's going on back there, and either to prepare you for it or to help you dismantle it. But this is how it works, and I'm talking about it, you know, sort of amorally rather than judgmentally.
So, yeah, I think it's definitely going to prepare people and warn them, but it'll be interesting to see how many people start trying to replicate the types of campaigns and manipulation that you sort of pioneered.
I think it's already, I mean, I've already been getting emails from people telling me, they're like, oh, you know, I did exactly what you're saying I should do. And it's like, I think you read the book wrong, but, you know, good luck to you, man. I hope it works out.
Yeah,
that's the thing, is that you can't, you play with fire, you do get burned sometimes. And I try to make it very clear that, like, this is playing with fire, and you've got to be a professional, and you've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to know that, you know, it's sort of inevitable that it's going to escape your control.
Yeah, it's always hard to sort of control someone's interpretation of something. You can obviously write the best book you can, but you know, you can't really necessarily control how they interpret it and run with it. And I guess that the old adage of, you know, any publicity is good publicity is kind of ingrained in a lot of people, whether it's right or wrong, and, you know, they'll run with it just to get the publicity.
And that's sort of what I talk about in the book too, is like, I don't fault people for taking advantage of the system. It's like, if you invested a lot of your money into making a product, or, you know, you spent 2 years of your life writing a book, or, you know, you depend on your blog to feed your family, you're not going to sit back and go like, oh, I'm not going to do that. Like, these things are there. They're easy to take advantage of, and they're very lucrative for people to play with. The system is essentially asking for people to do that if it's going to leave itself so undefended. And I'm hoping that the book can sort of open some people's minds to that thing and make it a little bit more difficult, because I don't think anyone benefits from rampant media manipulation.
Very true. Well, something you mentioned there is a really good point about people investing, you know, a year or 2 years of their life producing a product, whether it's a book or a new web startup or a physical product, the next, you know, nuclear-powered mousetrap or something like that, whatever it might be. They spend so much time invested in making a product. And something you actually said, which I really loved, with your conversation with Chase Jarvis on Chase Jarvis Live, it was really refreshing to hear, and it was something that, you know, I agree with quite heavily, in it, that it's not about the product. You know, you don't often hear other people kind of, I guess, preaching the importance of marketing and how much more important that actually is than just creating good shit.
Yeah, like, look, I think, and actually when we were having that conversation, Chase said it well. It's like, look, we take it for granted that what you're making is worth people seeing and it's good. Because if it's not, it's sort of none of this shit matters. But the reality is, just making good stuff never has been and it never will be enough. you're not going to, it's not like how you used to write books, which was like, you spend 2 years on a typewriter, then you mail the only copy of your manuscript out to Scribner's in New York, and 6 months later they send you your first check and tell you it's going to be in stores. That's just not how it works. Like, if you want people to know about your book, you've got to jam it down their throats. You've got to make this a marketing sensation if it's going to move copies. And people are like totally caught off guard by that. Like, they think like, okay, I'll start thinking about marketing like 2 weeks before my product comes out. And the reality is they're going to have to spend more than 2 weeks just researching before they even start marketing, They're going to have to spend 2 months marketing. And so, like, what I've been talking to a lot of people about is sort of thinking about how you can build that marketing mindset into the products you make, because that's the only way you're going to survive. I mean, there's a million blogs out there publishing a million posts a day, being read by millions of very busy people, and if you want to shatter through that noise, it's not going to happen accidentally, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just sad to me people spend all their time, worrying about a product, before they even do any market research and know there's people out there wanting to buy it. It's a big faux pas that a lot of people have. So having said that, so go ahead.
No, sorry.
I was going to sort of say, so having said that, you've done the book trailer. That's something that's obviously already been leaked, or not leaked, but released. Nice job, really enjoyed it. That kind of is a staple these days, I guess, since Tim, really popularised it, for want of a better term, with his 4-hour body book. But what else have you got planned for the marketing of this book? We may as well share some of the secrets and sort of, no doubt the book's great. I've read, not all of it. I only got it a few hours ago, actually, from your publicist team. So I've only been able to sort of devour the first little bit of the contents. I was cramming it through before I jumped on the call. But what's planned for this? Because, the book's good, but, you're a marketer. What's the marketing look like?
Yeah. Look, there's no way I was going to write a book about marketing and then not use all the stuff that I talk about in the book. So,
actually, let me interrupt you for 2 seconds. Sorry, Ryan. And I think you're in a much better position than I am. Like, some of the listeners may know that I had my first book published when I was 21, so a little bit younger than you. But it was a marketing book as well. But the battle that I had with the marketing team at the publicist, and it was, Wiley, which is one of the larger publishers. Right. I remember having almost yelling matches going, you are paying me to write a marketing book, but you're not listening to me about how to market the damn book. It just did not make friggin' sense to me. And it was so frustrating. And so many authors I talk to have that similar sort of battle. So I think it's good being in the position you are now, and with the way that the internet's sort of really taken on in the last 10 years, that, I guess publishers have to be more aware about the need to market and a bit more open. So, I'm keen to hear.
Yeah, of course. Of course, and like I've had many of those conversations, both like doing my own book and doing books for other people. Like, that sort of goes back to what we were just saying. If you're publishing a book and you think the publisher is going to take care of selling it for you, you are going to have a very rude awakening on your release date when you sell 0 copies, because that's just not what they do. Like, publishing houses are basically really good at distributing books, and that's about it. And distributing and editing books, and that's about it. Authors do their own marketing, and so knowing that going in and knowing I was writing a marketing book, it was like, look, I have to completely take on this burden, and I can't, count on anyone else to make this stuff happen. So I sort of knew that going in, and I very much thought about how can I use this opportunity to market the book to prove the stuff that I'm talking about, and sort of come up with case studies and examples and sort of reinforce all the things I've talked about. So, like, for instance, knowing that the online media cycle drives the offline cycle, and the offline cycle looks for sort of proof of newsworthiness, and they're slower to get going. All my internet press is coming first week, knowing that that's where the mainstream media gets their sort of news leads. So, like, I have an old school, like A-list publicity guy, a private publicity guy that I hired, but I know that he's not going to be coming through with me until I do the heavy online lifting myself. Like, the New York Times isn't just going to do a profile of some kid they've never heard of. That kid's got to be a hot news topic for them to jump on it. So I'm sort of using the first week as proof of concept to drive a lot of web attention, doing podcasts and guest posts and interviews and Skype shows and web shows and anything I can do to get attention on the internet that I'm going to make sure registers on the radar of the mainstream press, and also registers on the radar of the people doing like book buying at Barnes & Noble and Amazon and Books A Million. I have a couple stunts planned because that's what I specialize in. I can't give them away because then they won't be as awesome. But I've got some stuff planned, and I very much intend for this book to generate a lot of controversy and to get a lot of attention. And it's going to do that because I wrote the book to make that happen, and I did the research and I identified the sort of influencers who are going to set that off.
So that was obviously, coming back to what you said before, you were planning the marketing as you were creating the product, I guess. You actually sort of tied in some elements into the content that will actually drive the marketing just by purely being highly, for want of a better term, controversial content?
Yeah. And it's like, how can you, you've got to think about the attention that you want to get and the people that you want to write about you and cover your book. And then you've got to back your way out from there, how to make it happen. You don't just write a random sort of stream of consciousness and then go like, I hope the Washington Post is into this. I hope I get covered in USA Today. Because that's just not going to happen. If you want to get covered by them, you better think about the things that they cover and make sure that your thing fits in that wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, are you expecting places like Gawker and Gallicat to actually support the book in either directly or indirectly by just talking about it because they've been featured there and they need to respond? Or do you think they're just going to talk about other stuff that's happening?
I certainly hope that they respond, and I think what they'll find when they do see the book, because obviously it's been heavily embargoed and not a lot of people have gotten their hands on it, I hope that they see that the book is a lot more thoughtful and a lot more researched and deliberate and conscientious about these things that affect a lot of people than maybe they would have expected from the title or the cover of some of the existing coverage. I mean, I just did a 2,500 word article for Columbia Journalism Review. So if this was a book about just sort of tricking people, I don't think that these sort of smart, educated outlets would be receptive to my message, but it turns out that they are.
Yeah, very, very cool. So you mentioned just then about very heavily researched. So in your review of Stephen Pressfield's latest book, you wrote, "I'm not sure if Turning Pro has the same shock to the system as The Water Art, but it's still a great and necessary book." Now I love Stephen's stuff. It's incredible about getting through resistance and the creativity sort of process. So how did you find the writing and creative process of putting together Trust Me, I'm Lying?
Well, I was very fortunate that I've worked with a bunch of authors before, and part of the reason I worked for them is I had no idea how to do a book. I mean, you read a lot of books, but you don't know. It's sort of you don't know how to write a song until you know how to play the instruments, right?
Yep.
It's not just you've got to know how they work together, how you start, how you build this thing. And so for me, part of the reason I sort of apprenticed under these authors is I really wanted to observe them and their craft and see how they did what they do. And it was in that process and helping them and working with them and asking them a lot of questions that I figured it out. And so for me, writing the book was a lot easier. I actually did the whole book in less than 3 months. The writing, the research had taken another year before that. But for me, the writing process was a lot harder, but also easier than I thought. When you do your preparation in the gym, before you get out on the court, it's always easier to win. And so for me, I'd spent my time practicing and learning and talking to smart people. So when it came time to write my book, it was really just about, knowing what I was trying to do and what I was trying to write, and then just actually doing it.
Yeah. Was there any particular takeaways you were able to get from, pardon me, Tucker and Robert about the creative and writing process, besides just getting your butt in a chair and actually just typing the keys?
Yeah, like you win long before game day. Like I'm saying, like you've got to research the shit out of whatever you're talking about.
Yep.
Like even Tucker, like you'd think that Tucker's writing funny stories about himself, that sort of like requires no research. I mean, that guy has read every book about comedy and humor and memoir and nonfiction and fiction that you can imagine. I mean, he owns more books than I do, and like he's studied that field so deeply that then when he has something to say about himself, he knows the best way to do it. And Robert obviously is one of the most voracious researchers and sort of historians on the planet, I would say. And if you're not doing that level of research, don't expect to write a book as good as they have. And I committed that to myself that I wasn't going to write some sort of like anecdotal marketing book. I really wanted to write something that was backed up by the facts, and that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, because that's where you started, wasn't it? When you first started working with Robert Greene, was researching his 50th law book with him. Is that correct, or am I sort of putting two stories together?
Yeah, no, that is correct. Yeah, so I was Robert's research assistant for the last 4 or 5 years now, I think, and so I really learned his system, and I put my own spin on it when I was finally the one who was in control of what I was, when it's about me, not about like sort of what serving, a larger client, and that's undoubtedly where any research I did, like I credit to Robert because he showed me how to do it.
Yeah. So what does that system look like? Can you share a bit? Can you sort of mention there that you learn at Robert's system and then you've developed your own? What does research for a book look like?
It requires like reading very deeply into topics, like in sort of chasing down all these leads, and then you record your thoughts or the themes or connections that you're doing. And like for instance, I do them on index cards, or I take notes like on Google Docs or something. Then once you have this collection of themes, it's about grouping those themes together and noticing patterns and connections between those themes. So like for me, when I'm researching the book, it's like I'm reading all these things about media and influence and manipulation and such, and then I'm noticing like patterns. And then as I collected, let's say like 10 examples of this pattern, it's like, oh, that might be a chapter. And so by the time I sat down to write, I had every chapter essentially all outlined and worked up before I sat down to write any of the sentences. Like I knew what I was going to say and what I was going to use to support those things before I, sort of sat down at a blank screen.
Okay, very cool. So I'd love to delve into the reading and education sort of stuff, which is obviously the other side of the fence, which is sort of where we're leading to. But I don't want to go too much into your reading rituals because you write about that on your Forbes column and on your blog and things like that. But two questions about your reading is you do say from a ritual perspective that you should always get your next book from the book you've just read. So once people hit Amazon.com right now and grab a copy of, Trust Me, I'm Lying, what is the next book they should buy at the same time that's mentioned in your book right now to save on shipping? What's that second book they should read after yours?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question because I actually have a further reading section at the back of the book. The two books that influenced me the most when I was writing this were The Brass Check by Upton Sinclair, which was like a muckraking expose of journalism in the early 1900s. And then I also liked this book, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, which I think was a very incisive analysis of the effects on culture that television has had. And I sort of applied what they were talking about, although they were specifically talking about two very different things. I applied the lens that they were using to what we were talking about in this book, which is, media and blogs. And I like to find the next book in the book that I'm reading because I'm going to get that much more out of the next book because like I'm sort of bridging the two. So instead of reading, it's like it's maybe you're getting 100% more material, but it's only like 30 or 40% more work. And so I like those those ROI multipliers.
Very, very cool. You mentioned before that Tucker's probably the only person that that's got a bigger reading library than you. And I've had some conversation with Tucker, and he's ridiculous when it comes to content consumption and reading. So, what sparked that passion for you? Because you read, from my understanding, 4 or 5 books a week.
Yeah, I mean, I read as much as I conceivably can whenever I'm interested in doing it. I don't have quotas or anything. I love reading, so I do it a lot.
What sparked that passion?
I've always loved reading, as a kid. And I think, honestly, everyone loves reading. It's just some people are exposed to books that change their life really early on. And so those people know that reading is worth their time. And I think a lot of people aren't introduced to the right books. So I was really fortunate in that I had mentors my whole life who were constantly recommending good books that changed how I thought about the things. And Tucker was certainly one of those people, very early on, read this, now read this, now read this. And I read them all, and I loved them, and they changed my life. And now I've seen a firm, causation between, or cause and effect between reading a book and getting something out of it. And so I do it, as much as I can now.
Awesome. So taking that mentor approach, if you had a 16-year-old, nephew or a godson, besides The Game by Neil Strauss, what would you recommend they read as a 16-year-old to not only learn from, but I guess to also learn to love to read?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I think it all depends on the person, and it depends on where they live. And, for instance, one of the things that gets me the most excited about reading is, reading about the place that I'm currently at. So, you grew up in New York City, you should be reading all the great books about New York City so you can read something and then understand why the place you live is the way that it is. But, just in terms of really general books that I think change people, I think Ender's Game is a great book for young people. I think I read The Great Gatsby when I was a kid. That profoundly influenced me. I think I like the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
I think I think Robert's books, if a kid is sort of young or experienced enough, I think those are important. I'd really tailor a reading list to the kid and their personality, and recommend books that maybe you didn't love but you think that they'll love, because it's about catching that fire inside of them, not necessarily forcing them to read the classics, because the classics don't work for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I completely agree. So I guess when you're saying you got to read a book that matches the market and really supports the person. Why the heck did you read 50 Shades of Grey?
I mean, I'm interested in any book that can sell 20 million copies.
Absolutely.
That comes out of left field and sort of shocks and disgusts everyone in the publishing industry. Says to me okay, this book has something special in it. What is it speaking to? Why is it resonating with people? And I wanted to figure that out. I'm not sure I've cracked it, but I have a better idea than if I was just, guessing.
See, well, this book almost goes against what we've been talking about for the last half hour, because it's not a well-written book by any stretch of the imagination.
50 Shades of Grey?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a book that makes people talk. So the fact that it's not very good almost works to its advantage, right?
Yeah.
I would say that a significant amount of its sales have been driven by people talking about how much better they are than the book.
So, look, do you know what the marketing story is behind that book? Because it's come from nowhere. It's a bit of fan fiction from Twilight.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. The book was actually Twilight fan fiction. Not a lot of people know that. It started as Twilight fan fiction, and then so it had a core audience of loyal people who are sort of open and accepting to lower quality work, to put it lightly. And then she self-published. She put it on Amazon. It was at a low price. So basically, things that would usually count against a book, being of a weird subject matter and being self-published on the internet, actually worked to its advantage in the sense that it made the cost of reading it and experimenting with it really low. So, like, if this book had started at the shelf on Barnes & Noble, or on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, it's not going to have the same viral dispersion the way that it did online, because, like, who's going to want to pick up a book that looks shitty and pay $26 for it?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, so I think that was going for it, and then I don't know. It clearly spoke to something that we as a society don't understand or don't serve in women, as far as books are concerned, well enough, because there's a lot of shitty BDSM books out there,
yep.
and they haven't sold 20 million copies. What is it about this one that made it so successful? I don't know. I think anyone that tells you, like, some simple answer is probably full of shit. I would guess it's not sex, again, because there's a lot of books about sex.
Mills and Boon has been around forever.
Yeah. So I think this is something that's not that.
So are you going to reread it to find out?
No, it's pretty awful, man. I'm not going to subject myself to that again.
So if it's not 50 Shades of Grey, what is next for you after the book? Obviously, the next, hopefully two or so months is, really driving the book sales, hitting the New York Times list, and obviously having a lot of conversation with people about the book. What is next? Are you still going to be working with Tim on his next book? Has Robert got a new book coming out you're working on? Are you going to stick working with Dove and American Apparel? What's next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm booked solid with book launches for the next, probably 6 or 8 months. Just with clients that I really like working with and I'm excited about, and so I'm really excited to see where this goes. I think people will like it, and I hope they pick it up. And even if they don't, I've got more than enough work to keep me busy, and so for me, it's all upside, which is kind of the ideal position to be in.
Absolutely. So you're sticking out. So are you still full-time at American Apparel, or has the role changed in the last sort of 12 months or so?
Yeah, the role's changed. I'm more of an advisor than a full day-to-day person. But I work with them on projects constantly. I talk to Doug, the owner, on a almost daily basis, and it's a company I care a lot about, and I think is doing really awesome things, and doesn't deserve to have been sort of raked over the coals by the internet publicity machine the way that it was. And so part of writing this book was about setting that record straight too, Yeah. And so yeah, I'm always going to consider American Apparel a big part of what I do, just because they've done so much for me, and I care so much about what they do.
Well, given the PR sort of coals that you mentioned, do you think this book's going to sort of fuel the fire a bit more, because you come out saying that we manipulated a lot of these stories?
Yeah, I mean, is there going to be some people who latch onto that? Yes, but I think what I really want people to see is the fact that so much of what they've read and gotten outraged by and talked about was really just totally untrue, and that's bad. I mean, that's what does it mean when you've sort of written someone off as this evil monster the way they have Dove, when the information that you're using to make that decision is so suspect. And that's one of the big things I try to focus on in the book, is like, we're so quick to indict and write someone off based on like information that we read on blogs. So let me tell you, like, where blogs get their information, and I think you're going to be a little sobered by that thought,
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I couldn't agree more. I think, what Dove's done, particularly, with the way to make a business model work, where they're actually, producing everything in LA, or at least in America. Like, they're not sort of offshore and that sort of stuff. Just from a business model perspective, I think he's done an exceptionally good job to build a company of that size revenue. And obviously you can kind of, there's been, I think it's CBS reports and stuff where it's sort of, the cash flow ability of the business and stuff is going through some rocky times. But to build a sustainable business so far, that size, where everything's done on American soil, is a phenomenal effort.
Yeah, no, that's always what I thought, and I think it's a disgrace that the story that blogs have decided to publish is instead the one about these sort of suspect rumors and controversies and all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like part of the reason what motivated writing the book was sort of having an inside look at people like Dove and Tucker and even, I guess, Robert to some degree, and seeing how misrepresented they were in the public because for blogs to represent them properly would be too much work or take too much time or not be that interesting really sort of disgusted me, and I felt like that wasn't fair or right. And so the things that I've done on their behalf have always been about sort of making up for that deficiency. And then I realized, like, that's never going to solve the problem. If I want to solve the problem, I've got to explain what its root causes are. And I hope I've done that in the book.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, obviously, Robert and Dave and Tucker, but you've obviously worked with Tim as well, Tim Ferriss, who's a New York Times bestselling author, but is far less controversial in his approach, in his material. Have you found any differences between those sort of two groups of people working with them?
Yeah, I mean, my relationship with Tim is much more of one as a friend and as like an advisor than as like a direct role. And part of the reason is he doesn't need someone like me because his attention has always been positive, and the system treats him much more fairly because he sort of fits in. He sort of fits more in their conception of what like an author or a self-help guy should be like.
Yeah.
Tim is less complicated than some of these other things, and that's great for him because it means he's treated more fairly. And it just happens that other people who are more complicated or complex or have maybe good sides and bad sides, they don't get treated the same way, and so I have to sort of come in and work my magic.
Very cool. So one final question, mate, and I'll let you get back to beautiful New Orleans. What's the one question I haven't asked you that you want me to ask, or to lead you to talk about?
I don't. Yeah, no, I don't really have one. I feel like this has been a great interview. This has been cool. Like most people don't take the time to read the book or think about the person they're talking with, and like you made me think about things, and like that's like you can do that because you have a podcast with like real fans who listen to what you do and they trust you, and like you support them and they support you, and so that's always refreshing for me to be able to like sort of like get a glimpse of that world rather than the one that I spend way too much time with, which is where like bloggers are screwing over their readers and then publicists are screwing over the bloggers, and it's just this big cycle of deception all the way down.
Awesome, very cool. So the book is out July 19th. Trust Me, I'm Lying. I love the title. Did you do a bit of a split test like Tim did with the 4-hour work week?
Of course. This is the one that tested off the charts.
Awesome, very cool. So it's available everywhere. The good books are sold. Typical tagline there. But definitely check it out. Like as I said, I've got a copy of it only a couple of hours ago from the publicist. So I literally knew it was coming overnight. So I actually got up at about 4:30 a.m. this morning. I'm normally up at 5. So there wasn't that much earlier for me. I'm a morning person, but tried to devour as much as I could prior to the conversation today, and I must say it's definitely engaging, and I have no doubt that I'll have finished the galley version of the book before the day's out. So Ryan Holiday, thank you so much for your time, mate. Really appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners have got some huge feedback, and I know that a lot of them will go out and buy a copy of Trust Me, I'm Lying.
Well, thank you for having me.
Been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gaucher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at PreneurMedia.tv or drop them a line via PreneurCast@PreneurGroup.com.